Hi, I'm Michael Killen. This is the Killen Report. And on this show, I have a guest who I admire a lot. He is one of the more important mayors in the United States. He's been a mayor twice of the important city, Palo Alto. I plan to ask him, one, how do you become a good mayor? I plan to ask him some questions about the elements of California's climate change strategy, and I plan to ask him a couple of other questions. His name is Pat Burt. Pat.
Michael, good to see you again.
Wonderful to see you again. The other day we were on the phone together. I was at Stanford's KZSU, Stanford Radio 90.1, and we were doing an interview together. Thank you very much for being here. I'd like to start with a little issue. I'm working, well, first of all, I have this belief that the Hewlett-Packard Foundation, or the Packard Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, many other foundations have funded many projects to try to slow the growth of greenhouse gas emissions or to mitigate their effects, okay? And we have all these project leaders, and they have some money. They're all out with different kinds of solutions. Some are just verbal, some are technology, etc. But I feel when I talk to any of them, and I get to talk to a fair number of them, they all feel they're struggling to share their important message with some constituents, some group of people that need to hear their climate change message. It could be just an alert. It could be you need to do something, and here's a solution. First of all, would you agree that there really is this gap in the world right now between the message, sharing the important climate change messages with the people who need to hear it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the big challenges, has been for a long while, on how can we convey not only the problem, but that we actually have the solutions that are achievable and how we together can get there.
Okay, I have watched how you share the climate change message and how you try to persuade people, other cities, townships, counties, states to hear the message and act upon it. Do you care to tell us how you do it, or should I tell you, the audience, how I have observed you do it?
Well, tell me what you've heard or observed. I'm
What
curious,
I've observed,
and I'll chime in.
And first of all, you are in a position a lot of people are not in. You are the leader. You are the leader of a community, and you tap into the principle of leadership. And what that principle is, demonstrate leadership. Other cities, other communities, townships, see what the leader does, like the leader of Palo Alto. And then they try to embrace the good action strategies of the leader. That is, I have seen it now for several years, how you influence other cities, other government officials to understand, embrace the greenhouse gas climate change emissions, and to get them to try to embrace some of the good qualities you folks at Palo Alto have put in place. So what do you think of that?
I think it captures it well. First, I need to remind you, I'm a former mayor now, not a present one, but I'm still active in these areas. And yeah, I think one of the real messages that we are able to do by example is that a lot of the arguments against doing what's possible in addressing climate change are centered around that having a clean environment and low-cost energy and a strong economy are somehow mutually exclusive, that you have to make choices between them. We have now global leadership in greenhouse gas reductions, and we have electricity that is a third lower cost than PG&E and its surrounding communities, and we have an economy that one of our biggest problems is just how fast we are growing, and that's really a model economy for a lot of locations. So we feel like we've disproven that claim, and a lot of cities come and say, how can we get more of the Silicon Valley or Palo Alto magic? And one of the answers is, well, we're a sustainable city. That's part of our great attraction.
Great. I listened to you. I think you said it very nicely. I'd like to go to another topic. I know you have studied a lot of aspects of California's, the state, strategy, plans for trying to address climate change. And we both, of course, know that Governor Jerry Brown now wants, although I think he probably always wanted, California to be a world leader in addressing greenhouse gas emissions. But if we step back and if we look at what California is doing, it would be interesting to identify the key elements of California's strategy. I was wondering, would you present one, and maybe we can chat about it, and then I'm going to see if I can get a second one, and a third one from you, and then I think our audience will be able to go away from this show and have a clearer understanding of California's climate change strategy. Would you give me one?
Well, you touched on Governor Brown, and he actually began a great deal of this foundation way back in the 80s when he was first governor, and initiating some of the leading energy efficiency programs in the United States. We were leaders back then, and we have reaped the benefits as a state since then. So that our energy efficiency has meant that per capita and per GDP, we have been declining in our use of energy for over 30 years. And that's an overlay to all of the other initiatives that we have addressing greenhouse gases.
Would I be safe to say energy efficiency is one key element of California's strategy?
Yeah. In a way, it's an overlay to all the others, but yes, that's correct.
How about another one?
Well, we have now a very strong movement toward renewable energy sources, and this is around electricity and renewable electricity. And the state and the city have been moving in this direction now for 15 years or so, and we keep building on it. So now we're moving very aggressively. In Palo Alto, we have 100% carbon-free electricity.
Okay. Would that be under the category of renewable energy portfolio strategy?
Yes, or you could simply call it clean energy.
Clean energy. And would the essence of it be this? We have utility companies throughout the state, and they are providing consumers, factories, whatever, with energy. But we, by law, are dictating where those utilities, or what type of energy these utilities can acquire and create electricity, and a certain percentage can be from coal, oil, fossil, and the rest has to be from renewables.
The way it's written is that the percentage that comes from renewables is increasing gradually, well, more than gradually, pretty aggressively. We had a state, of course in California we have a good portion of our electricity that comes from hydroelectric power, which is non-greenhouse gas emitting. It's not defined as a renewable, but it is defined as no greenhouse gases or carbon-free. But then we first as a state had a goal to have 20% of our electricity from renewables, then 33%, and now we're going to 50%. That's in addition to the hydro. So we have no coal-powered electricity plants in the state. Southern California still has some electricity that comes in from out of state that's coal powered, but that's diminishing too. So we're closing in on having statewide carbon-free electricity in the future.
I'm getting old. You might have to help me. So you have given us three. One is energy efficiency. Another one is the renewable energy portfolio, which requires the utilities to provide us constantly a higher amount of renewable clean energy, let's say. And did we have a third?
Well, really, a next one would, and today the biggest is transportation.
Oh, that's right. Transportation. But when I think of transportation, to me, that's the electrification of all those medical components and mechanical, in the cars that allow us to use electricity and get more energy efficiency.
Well, so actually, that's a major part of where we're heading, and probably in the coming decade, the biggest part. But transportation, how much greenhouse gas we emit from transportation has to do with today with whether we drive alone, whether we have highly efficient vehicles, even if they still use gasoline, or if they're a plug-in hybrid, they might use electricity the first 30 miles and then high mileage after that. Whether we have shared vehicles, that is part of the emerging economy, and whether they're shared in a way that actually reduces car trips. So, and then of course, public transportation. So we have our Caltrain commuter rail system that is on the cusp of becoming electrified, and then electrified running off of clean electricity. And that'll happen within 3 years, well ahead of us having real broad adoption of electric vehicles.
Okay, so now you threw out a lot. Now let me see if I can go back. Energy efficiency, and why I, who is very knowledgeable about these things, is forgetting.
Well, it was the electricity production source.
That's the renewable.
Yep. And then transportation.
Yes.
And then we have essentially stationary energy use, buildings. And you know, when we look at that, it's both the energy we use in the buildings, whether it's electricity that's now becoming clean electricity, or natural gas, which remains one of the big challenges to reduce it, and also the materials we use for making buildings. One of the biggest emitters in the state of industrial greenhouse gas emissions is concrete generation. It's right behind oil refineries. So all of those have to do with kind of what happens in buildings, both our residences and our commercial buildings. And when I mentioned the energy efficiency kind of being an overlay over everything, energy efficiency affects our car energy use, but it also very much affects building use, and that's where California was great leaders.
So if I wanted, I could put buildings and transportation together in one category.
I'd keep them separate.
You want to keep them separate because they're so big. And in both cases, it's the application of energy efficiency as much as
and
possible.
renewables. So it's both of those things.
Okay. And then we have two more.
Well, I think we're up to 4.
We're up to 4, so
Yeah.
we have 2 more.
Yeah.
I got 2 more in my head.
Oh, you got 6? Okay. Well, certainly one has to do with waste as well. So our waste that we have is one of the most significant sources of greenhouse gases. It's not as big as transportation or generation of electricity or the buildings, but it's significant.
And what is the key way we are attempting to reduce emissions from waste?
In our state, it's most of all through recycling of materials as opposed to having them go to landfill and waste. But when we consume things, it's not only what happens to the waste, there's a lot of energy that goes into how that material was generated, that packaging or whatever.
Okay. All right, so we have 4 or 5 already?
Yeah.
Oh, I need 2 more, Pat.
2 more.
Oh, come on, no looking at your notes.
I'm trying to
Pat.
remember. Well, I mentioned industrial sources. So we have refineries and manufacturing facilities and concrete manufacturing, and that's a major source. That's about 20% of the greenhouse gases in the
So
state.
you're trying to improve the manufacturing process, make
Yep.
it more efficient. Okay. How about two more, Pat?
Those capture the major categories.
Cap and trade.
So that's a tool to achieve some of the others. Yeah. So that's certainly part if you look at the initiatives, maybe that's what you were really talking about, the initiatives that the state is taking. Cap and trade isn't a source of greenhouse gases, but it is a tool to be able to reduce them.
Okay. My vocabulary, I look at elements, and I define my elements the way I want. One more element. Come on. And you know this better than I'll ever know it.
Go ahead, tip me off, and then I'll respond.
How about land and people management?
Well, certainly that's a big one. Is when we concentrate people closer together in areas where they can live, where they walk and ride and use public transportation, and statistics show people who live in higher density buildings per capita use less energy and are more efficient. And so a lot of what we're trying to do in the state is to do that not only for purposes of energy efficiency, but also to preserve our natural environment. Because if we have more and more people, we're in danger of losing more and more of our natural environment. And that's one of the real challenges of the sustainability movement, is how do we do that?
So more compact housing, okay, uses less energy. And did you mention we want to put those more compact facilities right near transportation hubs?
Not only near transportation hubs, but the statistics show that people who live downtown near transportation hubs, they avoid more trips because of walking and riding to locations than they do from using mass transit. So we call that now in Palo Alto pedestrian and transit-oriented development. And the pedestrian part is really part of a quality of life. So if we just pack people in higher density and degrade the quality of life, that's not much of a solution.
All right. I think we hit on all the elements and whatever you referred to as source or whatever. We're on the same table. But do you have any others, or I'm ready to go somewhere else?
Go somewhere else if you like.
Right next to Palo Alto is the town where I now live, although I used to live right around the corner from you. It's Menlo Park, and Facebook is now building Facebook Village. That's, to me, a new concept. What's Facebook building? Could you share what you believe it is?
Well, to the extent I'm familiar with it, they're now looking at not merely adding millions of square feet of office space, but in addition to that, adding housing and retail and services. So it's really a step in the right direction for where we have large commercial development, to make sure that we're not having these office parks and then everybody drives to get their bread and drives to go home and everything else. Now that project still doesn't come close to adding as many housing units as it brings in new employees, but it's a step in the right direction.
All right, so we have Facebook Village being built, and I hear Google is building Google Village?
Something like that. So that was really driven in Mountain View by the city of Mountain View wanting to say, we've got a problem. What's called the North Bayshore area, which is Google and a bunch of other, Microsoft and other companies that have tens of thousands of jobs. There's almost no people who live there. There's very little services. And the vision is to integrate a large volume of housing and services.
Okay, so 30, 40 years ago, I remember they were building huge shopping centers and no one lived there. And then we started building these big manufacturing or office building complexes and no one lived there. And now with Facebook and with Google, we're building communities where people work, get entertainment, and shop.
And
something
live.
of that. And live. Okay. And I was wondering if you care to talk about something you shared with me offline. And I know you're in the local community, but you have a vision of national interest and political interest. Do you care to share how you are teaming up with other people to help send more Democratic political leaders to Congress from this great state? Care to talk about that? You don't have to if you don't want to.
So, yeah, we'll switch from a nonpartisan initiative, which is really to have a sustainable community. On the partisan side, there are actually 7 congressional districts in California that are held by Republicans, but Hillary Clinton won those districts in the last election. And so those districts are very obtainable to win by New Democrats in 2018. And they'd be 7 of the 24 districts that are needed in the entire country for the Democrats to take control of Congress. I'm just now working with a new super PAC that is focused on those 7 districts. It's called Fight Back California, and it's led by former Congresswoman and Undersecretary of State Ellen Tauscher, and it's very focused on really having candidates who understand their districts, not a one-size-fits-all, and making sure people get out to vote and understand the policies and issues that matter to people who live in those districts. So we're creating a Palo Alto support group for that.
Good. And I think it fills a need. A lot of people in California who have certain political leanings, we feel helpless because the election, for example, president or Congress, whatever, it's all over before our vote even comes in. So I think what you're doing is just wonderful. And now the other day, you and I came in contact when I was working at Stanford. And we have not had a chance to really discuss what I'm doing there. And do you care to know, and do you care to ask me? What would you like to know about?
Suddenly you were on KZSU,
yeah.
One of my favorite stations, and what gives there? You're not an undergrad, so what's going on there?
Well, I've been invited by that radio station, KZSU, Stanford Radio 90.1 FM, to have a radio show. And, I have this TV show, The Killen Report, and we're in Palo Alto, and we're producing this at the Mid-Peninsula Media Center. But I also produce TV shows up in San Rafael at CMCM Marin TV. And my life, to some extent, has been television, but all of a sudden, Stanford is pulling me into becoming a radio talk show host. And I'm going to I think we're going to fully announce it in about 4 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. I'm going to have a show it's called Climate Issues. And I'm hoping to limit it to 1 hour a week. But I find people around me who are talking about, well, that's not very much, Michael, 1 hour a week. And so I'm over there right now learning how to run all the gangs of CD players, record players, and other things, which is not something I'm used to.
Well, it's great because so many people listen to podcasts now, and as a prime source of information.
Yes, and just like I have syndicated my television show across the United States to about 50 stations, I am planning to very quickly master the art of being a radio talk show host. And then I plan to do two things. I plan to sign up another 50, 100 radio stations And at the same time, just like we have YouTube, which takes, in this case, my TV show and sends it out as a video, I plan to take my radio show and send it out as podcast. And I'm doing all of this because, for the most part, I have a sense of the battle with climate change, with greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm a believer that the battle could turn on messaging and communications, educating, helping to educate a great number of people, some in high political positions, some who are just unemployed, whatever. Have to educate them of the great threat and the great opportunities, like the opportunities your city has figured out with your help, how to turn greenhouse gas emission, that problem, into multiple benefits for your city. So, Pat, it's been nice seeing you again.
You too, Michael.
And what if I tell you we are almost finished? And I want to say I've thanked you in the past for your service to the community, and I want to thank you again.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest has been Pat Burt. He has been the mayor of Palo Alto several times. No doubt he'll probably be a mayor of Palo Alto again, or he'll be jumping to some higher positions. Also, he has been a councilman for Palo Alto, and he is using the power of leadership to help other cities, communities, counties be more effective in improving their communities. Again, I'm Michael Killen.